I'm pleased to be joined from Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan by Djoomart Otorbaev, former Prime Minister of the Kyrgyz Republic, from Beijing by Professor Zhang Xiaoyan, Associate Dean of Tsinghua PBC School of Finance, also from Beijing by Olena Prochenko, journalist with China Arab TV, and from Sao Paulo, Brazil by Leonardo Artur, founder and CEO of Brazil 24/7, a Brazilian news and political analysis website. The warmest welcome to all of you. So just on Thursday morning, the opening session of this year's National People's Congress, or China's top legislature, Premier Li Qiang gave a government work report where he talked about the achievements China made during the past year, but also during the past 5 years, as well as setting out the targets for the year 2026 and for the year till 2030. He gave out some very important targets, much anticipated. For instance, China's GDP growth rate to reach something between 4.5% to 5% for the year 2026, and added this, that China will also strive for better in practice. So I'm going to go to Mr. Otorbaev first. Your Excellency, welcome to the program. What is your biggest takeaway from reading the report or following the session?
We are, as neighbors of China, really understand well what's going on in that country, which becoming the economic engine, not only for Asia, but the rest of the world. And of course, we very carefully reading what's happening during two sessions meeting. There is not much surprise, a lot of numbers, a lot of achievements for the future were discussed in the past by media experts, by analysts, etc. But now, after two sessions, those targets will be the law. So what we impressed about is that the focus on high quality development and new high productive force activization, because as in Central Asia, we have highly educated population, we're really looking forward to line up and cooperate with China on those particular areas. And that is where we will be focusing. We will be focusing on industrial innovation, in high-tech cooperation, and very good communication with each other in transport and communication. So, for example, the biggest infrastructure project in Central Asia will be a building of the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway, which will be cutting the time between China and Europe for another week and shorten distance for 900 kilometers. With that, Kyrgyzstan becoming the not landlocked, but land-linked country. And many other things like production of factories like BYD, Cherry, and Chang'an in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. So we're transferring our cooperation from only energy or something like hydrocarbon supply to China to industrial cooperation. And this is very impressive.
Indeed, it seems that from the Central Asian perspective, China's stability and continued growth along the path it has set over the past few decades means a great deal of opportunities and for cooperation, especially. Ms. Zhang Xiaoyan, let's talk about this year's GDP growth target. As I mentioned, it's been set for the year 2026 between 4.5% to 5%, and will strive for better in practice. How significant are these numbers, and exactly what this phrase mean, what this sentence means?
I think, this is a very important notion for this year. We set the GDP growth to be between 4.5 to 5% growth rate. This is probably the first time we mention a growth rate of lower than 5%. So I think, as an economist, here's how I see it. First of all, over the past many years, our growth rate has been really, really high. People might think, how come the rate now is lower? And they start to feel like, okay, maybe something else is going on. Well, I can tell you, this is a very reasonable and a pragmatic number because our goal is to achieve doubling the growth by year 2035, meaning that the country needs to achieve an annual growth rate of 4.2%. Now, remember, it's also announced the growth rate for 2025 is 5%. It's, against all the uncertainties and challenges, we're doing great. And right now, the rate is set at 4.5 to 5%. So we have a little bit of flexibility. We will be able to achieve our goal of doubling by 2035. That's one way, and we're very confident about that. But on the other hand, we also have the flexibility to adjust our growth rate, to leave some space, to grow on some particular areas. So I'm very confident this can be achieved.
So on Thursday morning, China announced the targets for 2026, setting the goal between 4.5% to 5%, and said it will strive for better in practice. Actually, another very important task for this year's session is to set out the guideline for the next 5-year plan, which will anchor policies between 2026 to 2030. And interestingly, China did not set a specific numeral target. Instead, it says China expects to keep its GDP growth within an appropriate range, with annual growth rates to be determined in light of actual conditions. That's according to the report. So I'm going to Olena Prochenko. How do you read the targets that's set for China for 2026, between 4.5% to 5%, and with the possibility of striving for better if conditions allow?
Against the backdrop of growing global uncertainty, China injects stability and confidence into the world. It drives sustainable growth, multilateral cooperation, and inclusive development, stabilize global industrial and supply chains, and offers a feasible path to modernization for developing countries. And countries around the world hope to cooperate with China, like in infrastructure, trade and investment, agriculture, green energy, digital economy, healthcare, and more. And China's high-tech achievements in artificial intelligence, digital technologies, and humanoid robots, they primarily bring opportunities to all the world, fostering mutually beneficial scientific and technological cooperation. And China prioritizes high-quality development, scientific and technological innovations, green transition, opening up, and the improvement of people's well-being. China's steady development drives global economic growth, expands economic and trade cooperation, shares development experience, and brings more and more development opportunities to other countries all over the world.
Well, talking about sharing development opportunities with other countries in the world, the report that was delivered did talk about sharing growth opportunities, higher level of quality opening up, and shortening negative list, especially in services sector. So, Leonardo Artush, going over to you, how have you followed the report, and what is your biggest takeaway?
Well, I just published the first story in our website about the growth target. I think those are very reasonable numbers. I was afraid that China would, define a lower target, but 4.5 is almost the same as.
Why were you afraid? It's interesting. Interesting.
I really believe that China will deliver, and we are living in a very unstable world. So. It won't be surprised to me if China delivers 5 or even more than 5. So we need to look at China not only as the factory of the world, but also as the biggest consumer market, which opens opportunities for many countries, including Brazil, that is a big exporter to China. And the bigger the middle class in China becomes, the better for countries like Brazil, who exports a lot of, food, agricultural, mining products also. So in this, crazy world we're living, it's very good to see China growing 4.5, but I believe that China will grow faster.
So one key word is actually high quality development. Well, indeed, it has been the key word for quite a couple of years, but it seems that during this year's session, greater emphasis is put on this. Mr. Otorbaev, from that perspective, what are you seeing in terms, what messages did you pick up?
Actually, what will happen in a 15th 5 years plan is that China will make enormous and unique attempt to overcome so-called middle income trap. So currently, China GDP per capita is around $13,000 per capita, and during these 5 years, it can grow tremendously higher. The only way out of middle income trap, which our practice show these days, is to move into high quality development. You can't overcome middle income trap by building cement factories or investing in agriculture or just in producing anything. You have to move strongly to high tech as well as to services sector. So this is experience show that it's only two ways to do it. So that is why we're really looking forward for China's leadership in that way. So currently we have two countries around the world which is leading in high-tech race, the US and China, and this is healthy situation when you have competition. So I always trying to underline that the real secret behind China's success is fierce internal competition. Even government persuade companies not to fight too much, not to work and not to sell below the cost. So what I mean is that new horizon, that for instance, research and development spending will reach 3.2% per GDP in 2030, which is tremendous number because up to 2030, GDP itself will be growing tremendously high.
Right.
It means that more and more science and technology discoveries we expect. Every year, China generates 4 million young talents, which will be working hard on STEM. You cannot find around the world these numbers. And competition between those graduates, new talents, will drive China ahead. Another point which I would like to underline in high quality development is that China is willing to invite foreign talents. This is so-called K visa, which China introduced, which invite people, talents around the world without visa, with immediate residence and work permit to compete with China talents. This is great achievement, and this is indeed the way forward and the way to future progress. And we are in Central Asia are ready to work with China on that areas.
Indeed, some of the changes have happened actually pretty rapidly and are picking up pace. For instance, in terms of sci-tech innovation, in terms of R&D spending, for instance, over the past 5 years, R&D spending nationwide has been increasing, according to the numbers released on Thursday morning, has been increasing by annual average of 10%, has reached 2.8%. That is a level that surpasses some countries in the OECD and developed countries standards. So China is really investing heavily in terms of R&D, in terms of high-tech development. And we're seeing here, for instance, China is going to build, according to the government plan, 3 world-class sci-tech innovation engines, namely Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei in the north, the Yangtze River Delta area in southern China around Shanghai, and the Greater Bay Area at the Pearl River Delta area. So, Ms. Zhang Xiaoyan, how do you look at the emphasis in terms of sci-tech innovation, in terms of being a step ahead of the curve to prepare for the technological advances in the near future?
I think the previous guest already discussed the growth rate of 4.5 to 5%, how important that is, and we're pretty confident. Now, to drive this growth, like Mr. Otorbaev mentioned earlier, it has to be the case. The technology has to, pick up. That's why you mentioned that the R&D annual growth rate, the number I'm looking at is the whole society annual growth rate of R&D is 7% and above. The whole market is investing in this technology. And China, right now, this is we call the new quality growing forth. Not only we have many engineers, and we have great national labs, we have a lot of infrastructure undergoing, to promote the growth in all kinds of manufacturing, high-end manufacturing, as well as artificial intelligence. We also have the digital economy is going to account for the GDP, the growth is going to account for 12.5% for the future. And, all of that is painting a very rosy picture. Now, in this world of a lot of uncertainty, I have to say technology is one very important force to push humankind ahead. And China, with very careful planning and a gigantic investment and the whole society endeavor, this is very likely, I think it's going to happen. But I also want to mention one more thing that people sometimes do not pay attention to. In this work report, also mentioned sustainability is extremely important. China is not, is always feeling the responsibility of leading the sustainability campaign in the world.
Well, absolutely. China has always kept its promise and stepping up its efforts in terms of building a beautiful China, green China, and new targets have been set to meet China's targets of carbon peaking by 2030 and neutrality by 2060. So on that front, actually, there's a lot to be said. But, the thing is, we here in China, we take it for granted that China is committed to this cause. We don't even think that is something extraordinary. We know that the government has set the blueprint, and they are going to keep their word because it's written black and white imprint, and you can just say what happened to this. You promise you do this. But staying with high tech, Olena, let me come to you. As a foreign correspondent working in China, where China is in terms of applying high technology to not just people's daily life, but also in production, how are you impressed with that? And where are we vis-a-vis the rest of the world, especially, major countries that are on par in terms of development with China?
Yes, you're right that China prioritizes high quality development and tech innovation and green transition and opening up and people's well-being. Of course, people's well-being. It is like Mrs. Zhang, she said China very responsible for people's well-being. And China's stable development drives global economic growth and expands trade cooperation and shares development experience. So those can bring more development opportunities to all over the world. Yes.
In terms of sustainable development, what we're hearing, for instance, China will accelerate the green transition across the board and cut carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP by a total of 17% in the 2026 to 2030 period. And this year, 2026, China will step up comprehensive efforts to improve the environment, boost the green and low carbon economy, and actively yet prudently work toward peaking carbon emissions and achieving carbon neutrality. Leonardo Artush, coming from Brazil's perspective, is that something that is what you are paying attention as well? How do you look at China's commitments and continued efforts in this regard?
Yeah, very strong commitment, very important to Brazil. I think that everyone knows that China is the biggest investor in Brazil in green energy, wind power, solar energy. And also, I think that applying new technologies in many sectors that can improve, the results, and also reducing the cost of production, which also can lower carbon emissions. I think that one of the greatest challenges for both countries is try to develop a common market for carbon emissions. So I know that China has a lot of carbon exchange markets, and this could become at least a BRICS common market for carbon emissions. I would like to see this in the future. But I also would like to mention, to give some words about technology, because it's very good to see this high quality development. And I would like to see China bringing its technology to Brazil. When we talk, for example, about AI, I'm very curious about how Chinese companies are applying AI into business, bringing more productivity, and not only what we see, when we talk about the supposed AI bubble in the West. In my opinion, the Chinese AI companies are very business oriented, and this could bring, also this high quality development to other countries. So I think that China can contribute with AI, high technology, and this, green economy is very strong in both countries. I can tell about Brazil and also about China.
Mr. Otorbaev, to follow up on the question about AI, in this report, China says it will nurture emerging future industries, and in 2026, the country will foster emerging pillar industries such as integrated circuits, aviation and aerospace, biomedicine, and low-altitude economy. China will also nurture industries of the future, such as future energy, quantum technology, embodied artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, and 6G technology. So in this regard, does China see an AI bubble, or how does China plan to navigate the future using AI technology without falling into the trap of an AI bubble?
If you look to the AI development, then we see two leaders, two undisputed leaders, which are China and the US. They are two leaders in terms of investment, in terms of breakthrough, but they're developing completely different AI model development. In the US, everything related to the private investor, a lot of loans. For instance, if you look to OpenAI, they have a debt of something like $2 trillion because they really wanted to capture the market. It means that they have to generate pure profit of $200 billion per year to cover this enormous debt, etc., etc. Bigger companies just fight to the death to get the first place. In China, situation is completely different. There's so many startups and so little profits that people saying how this environment can survive in terms of investments. But you look so-called open sources. You just say, everybody, please contribute. And the companies which achieved good results in other areas for investing in AI. And sometimes the case of DeepSeek showed that very small investments could bring breakthrough results. In that respect, two different things. And it's saying shortly, if the US creating fight around the cash, around the loans, the China creating infrastructure for AI development. This is two different models. And as I mentioned in my previous answer, competition is always good. So competition in AI will be extremely fierce. But in China, it's no surprise. Everywhere in China is competition. That is the secret of China's success. And that is the reason why China will be always leader in many technologies, including AI.
In terms of AI, actually, there is more that has been said in the report. For instance, it said that China will create new forms of smart economy. And Professor Zhang, I would like to know a bit more about this from you. For instance, it says China will advance and expand its AI Plus initiative, promote faster application of new generation intelligent terminals and AI agents, and encourage large-scale commercial application of AI in key sectors and fields. Help us understand exactly what that means.
Okay, this my understanding is starting from a few years back, and all the countries have seen that artificial intelligence is going to be the new big thing for technological innovation. And for instance, last year in 2025, in the summer, we have this AI Plus plan already. And as Mr. Otorbaev mentioned, that China is approaching this from a very structural way. We want to put investment into infrastructure and so on and so forth. But right now, the focus is on AI adoption. So in the past, we're trying to develop AI by itself. It's growing by itself. But right now, we want AI to be combined with real practices. It doesn't matter which industry you are in. How can you make AI really help you to reduce the cost and improve your profits? And one big deal in this area is AI agent. Why AI agent? AI agent works like a human being, and when you use it, it helps, it's like artificial workforce. It helps you to lose or reduce the cost. So the next stage of AI competition in the world and inside of China, everywhere, is AI adoption. And right now in our 15.5 plans, it's AI plus. So AI plus all the important sectors that AI need to be implemented and really bring in the boost in productivity. That's what it means.
So it has to be cost effective. It has to produce something instead of just the technology. So basically China is trying to avoid the curse of an overheated AI sector, may I put it this way. I don't have much time left. The report is really comprehensive, so I encourage people to read it in full if you can. There is English version out there. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to my panelists. They are Djoomart Otorbaev, former Prime Minister of the Kyrgyz Republic, Professor Zhang Xiaoyan, Associate Dean of Tsinghua PBC School of Finance, Olena Prochenko, journalist with China Arab TV, and Leonardo Atush, founder and CEO of Brazil 24/7, a Brazilian news and political analysis website.